Hi, my name's Sasha, and as head researcher at datadrivesinsight.com, it's an absolute privilege to be here with you today to share with you the 4 key ingredients to effective safety leadership based on our extensive longitudinal research. Now, I know research doesn't excite as many people as it does me, and so my goal for today is to make this presentation as practical and as real to all of you as possible. So I'm joined by my colleague Ash Hunt from Verizon, who's worked in safety critical environments for decades with the goal of improving both safety and performance. So, like any good researchers, we began the task of trying to work out what makes a good safety leader. And so we turned first to Google. And as you can see, there's a range of different views and opinions on what actual good safety leadership looks like. Are there 6 qualities? Are there 11 characteristics? What does it take that sets a really high performing leader apart from one that's less performing? And so when you think about how do we actually want to measure good performance, it's all about what leaders make a difference and what leaders make a difference to the outcomes that are most relevant to organizations today. And so we looked at a number of different outcomes. Some of those were negative outcome indicators, things like number of claims, number of incidents, claims costs, those sorts of things. But we also looked at some positive outcome indicators, or what often is referred to as lead performance indicators. So things like the number and the quality of safety audits that are conducted. So a leader has an influence on just the number that are conducted, but also how effective is the quality of those audits. And so the question that we as a research team asked is, how do leaders impact these things? How can they impact outcomes that actually make a difference to organizations? So we went back to the literature. We looked at the research and we looked at what has come before us in terms of understanding where leaders can have the biggest impact on safety. And we realized safety leadership is not just about safety. All leaders in an organization have an impact on safety. So if you think about it, anyone in a leadership role has an impact on things that we can see or things that are visible in an organization, or in other words, people's behavior. So all leaders have an impact on the behavior of the workforce, but they also have an impact on what we can't see or the invisible. So when we think about it at the individual level, they're the beliefs, the values, and the attitudes the workforce might have that inform the behaviour. All well and good for a leader to tell people what to do, but if the leader's not there, if the workforce doesn't believe in why they're doing what they do, they're unlikely to fulfil on that behaviour long term. So one of the things we realised when looking at the research is that leaders need to have an impact at the individual level, both invisible and visible. But a highly effective leader also has an impact at an organizational level. So when you think about an organizational level visible factor, it's systems. So how does a leader influence the interconnected systems within an organization that impact on safety and performance? And then not just the visible, but how do leaders impact on the invisible as well? In other words, the organizational culture, the shared beliefs, values, and attitudes that are present in the organization. So ultimately, a leader, to be highly effective, needs to take an integral approach, or in other words, integrate these 4 key quadrants in order to be an effective safety leader. Putting this in terminology that a lot of other people are familiar with, we're looking at the difference between personal safety. So how can a leader influence personal safety? In other words, slips, trips, falls, things that are personally within my control. And how can a leader also influence process safety? So large organizational breakdowns or fractures or critical incidents that are due to a number of different organizational factors. Now, the research more recently has focused on process safety. So when there's a major breakdown or a catastrophic event, a lot of attention goes into how can the organisation work on its culture and its systems. Now, while they're really important, there's also an argument for the personal safety. Every single person in an organisation being personally responsible for their safety and the safety of others. So it keeps coming back to this concept of integral. So how can we integrate both personal safety and process safety? Now, that's what an effective leader needs to do. So it's not about a safety leader being more effective than another safety leader. It's anyone in a leadership position, in order to be effective, needs to have a positive impact on both personal safety and process safety. But how do we measure that? How do we know if a leader is doing those things? And that really became the backbone or the foundation for our research. So our research was about operationalizing this integration theory. And so what we did was we looked at what else was out there, what else existed to help measure an integrated approach to leadership. Now, the first attempt at integrating both personal and process safety was published by Stryker in 2010, and they suggested 7 safe practices that would achieve this integration. So what we did in the first experiment was asked a series of questions, and here are some samples of those questions, to numerous leaders working in safety critical environments and their managers, direct reports, their peers, to get 360-degree feedback to help understand how do they behave in response to those 7 safe practices. We then ran a factor analysis process over. So for anyone interested in factor analysis, here's your 30-second nutshell version of how we do that. Factor analysis is a process that assesses the variance between how people respond to each question. We then group each question together based on their similarities or the less variance in terms of how people respond to those questions. And based on that, you end up with reliable measures of different constructs. So rather than 7 different constructs, what we actually found is our analysis of 460 people who led safety critical environments indicated there were actually 4 factors that existed. And these 4 factors are the 4 key ingredients that I'm really excited to share with you today. The first one being commitment. Commitment is about demonstrating a personal commitment to safety and also engaging other people in that commitment. The second one being curiosity. So this is all about listening skills, leaders proactively listening to the right people and seeking to understand all perspectives of those people to truly understand a situation. The third, caring actively. Caring actively is about demonstrating genuine care to others and also demonstrating that there's a core belief that it is worth looking out for each other. And lastly, interconnectedness is for when a leader looks systemically to manage hazards, influence change, and build overlapping layers of protection throughout an organisation, really harnessing on systems theory and dealing with the interconnected natures of an organisation to implement meaningful change. So rather than me talk about these from a research perspective, I'm going to hand over to Ash now, who's going to give us some examples of how a couple of these have really played out in workplaces that he's worked with.
Okay, thanks, Sasha. As Sasha said, my name is Ash Hunt. I'm co-founder of Verizon and I'm a performance coach. So I'm here to talk you through the practical application of a couple of the intentional states. The first being commitment. Clearly, if we don't get the commitment right, it's pretty hard to get all the other 3 intentional states right. So let's have a look at that. Firstly, if you think about there's a scale between lower performing to higher performing, on that scale, there's various spots where you could have, where you or your leaders in your business could have their commitment. Now, it's an interesting one because most leaders that you talk to about their commitment, they're going to answer, well, of course it's high. You know, of course I'm 100% committed to people's safety. I don't want anyone getting hurt on my watch, you know. So on the surface, they have a very strong commitment to themselves and other people's safety and also performance. So that's the interesting thing, that our research shows that this is one of the areas that people are unconsciously unskilled. So let's have a look at what that means. It means that when you scratch the surface a little bit, sometimes people will open up and they'll say, oh, actually, she'll be right, mate. You know, that's a really famous Aussie cultural thing to say. She'll be right, mate. Or, you know, we do just need to get on and get this job done. Now, clearly, that level of commitment is at the lower end of the spectrum, and that'll lead to a reactionary culture. Well, things will go wrong and then we'll react to them. So that one's a bit easier to get your get a handle on. What I want to share with you is something up the other end of the continuum, or at least appears to be on the surface. And this is a very common commitment that's spoken about in most mega projects and lots of organisations around the world. And it's the commitment safety first, all right? Or safety is our number one priority. Now, clearly, this commitment is positively intentioned. It's wanting to make sure that everybody's looked after. Unfortunately, it actually leads to an environment where people get hurt. So to understand that, it takes a little bit of getting your head around it for most people. So why is that particular commitment suboptimal? Well, it's because if safety is first, right, then it actually leads to poor decision making. So I want to go through to the next slide. You'll see a cyclone on there, and you'll also see some gloves. Practical experience with this particular commitment was on a mega project up on the northwest of Western Australia, where because safety was first, if there was a cyclone within Kui of a particular island that we were operating on, everyone would down tools, all right? If a few people got hurt, got hand injuries, right, that's it, we'll get a blanket rule because safety's first. Everyone has to wear gloves every time we step out of the vehicle. Now, unfortunately, what happens in that kind of environment is it creates workplace pressure because schedules start getting jammed, and contractors may have contracts that mean that they have to comply with schedule pressures and things like that. And if it's getting compressed, then naturally, even without it being said, the workforce tend to take shortcuts, rush, and hide issues if they're coming up because they don't want to slow the job down any further than it's already been slowed down. So that level of commitment, whilst on the surface seems like it should be a high thing, actually ends up being a mediocre type of commitment. So I'd like you to consider for a second, well, what would a high performing commitment be? It's a tricky question sometimes. So to give you the answer for that is it's both. We need the ability to hold the complexity of what gets talked about as the interconnectedness of the commitment intentional state. What that means is we've got to both honour and have in our core values safety, performance, productivity, quality, sustainability, financial performance. We need to hold all of these things together, right? and actually work inside of that commitment in order to create optimal decisions, an optimal culture, and ideally the type of environment that means people can go to work and do a great job, but also go home safely. So, question, what's your cultural view regarding commitment in your organisation? Well, the only way you can find that out is to run an empirical assessment tool that brings the unconscious, unskilled views around commitment and brings it out to the surface so that they can be played with and explored. And only then can people make informed choices about how to create an extraordinary or an integral level commitment. Okay, I'm going to move. Righto, so now we're going to have a look at the next intentional state called curiosity. Again, there's a 0 to 10 spectrum that people could be on. Now, the research showed that curiosity is in fact one of the lowest performing out of the sample that were researched. So that means a lot of people are unconsciously unskilled. They don't know that they're actually not so good at listening. So how come? I'll share an example. This is an example. I was working in Queensland with a significant oil and gas construction project, and a bunch of superintendents, and we were doing some field coaching around safety and productivity performance. So the guys were a bit of classroom work, and the guys were practicing asking open questions and really practicing their listening skills. We get out into the field, and of course the guys who already think they're pretty good at listening, who think they already know what's going on with their various crews, in practice it looks a bit like this. So yeah, hey guys, how you guys going? Of course the answer is good. Yeah, okay, cool. Got any issues? Nah, mate. We're all good. All right. Well, do you need anything from me? No, mate. No, all good. All good. No worries, fellas. Have a good day. And so we'll walk away. We'll go, oh, so how did you go with that? Curiosity. I go, yeah, really good. Really good. And so if the person didn't use some kind of empirical tool to get some 360 feedback, or in this case, a bit of field coaching that can help them get some feedback, they would not actually consciously go about working on their listening skills, their ability to learn and understand their workforce, but also really listen and engage with their workforce to any ideas they've got about how to make things better. So we went back and we said, hey guys, can we have another go? You know, just pretend this is take two. And we asked them some open questions, and we really listened. And after a couple of minutes, the guys said, hey, you blokes, you seem like you really want to know what's going on for us. And we go, yeah, we do. We really do want to know, mate. And so he says, well, can you see about 100 meters or so up the track there? There's a right angle turn for this massive big pipe that we're welding. Like, yeah, we can see that. He goes, well, when we get there, it ain't going to fit. We're not going to be able to make the turn. It's going to delay us about a week, and we're going to have to do this process called an open, cut and shut. And we're like, right, how do you know that? I said, well, because this is the third process facility that we've built, and it happened exactly the same in the first two. So we haven't changed the way we're building it, mate. And so it's going to happen. It's going to repeat again this time. And we're like, wow, okay. Geez, thanks for sharing. And we're able to, with those guys, down tools and get some appropriate people in the crib room, and through listening to them and problem solving with them, we're actually able to find a way, a solution that saved us about a week of schedule, saved us a fortune. It saved those blokes a hell of a lot of frustration and rushing and taking shortcuts and all that kind of stuff. So it actually had a very, very big impact on both their safety and also their production performance. And that's all because we consciously focused on improving the intentional state called curiosity.
Thanks, Ash. Now, for the interest in time, we're unable to go into as much detail on the other two intentional states, but I know Ash would be more than happy to talk through some other examples of those. So feel free to get in touch with us after today's presentation to do that. What I do want to spend enough time talking to you today about, though, is what we've actually found. So yes, we defined these 4 intentional states and we've proven that they exist, but what impact do they have? And so what we've found out is, based on our longitudinal research, leaders that performed substantially better in these 4 states, that we use this tool called ISA 360 to measure those intentional states. And again, if you're interested in the specific tools that we use, happy to talk about that after today. Those leaders that performed substantially better in those resulted in a workforce that were more engaged. So what does that actually mean? We know the research shows that a more engaged workforce lead to high performance. But what does it actually mean for your workplace? So have a think about it. Just imagine if your staff felt 41% more valued and 59% more listened to. What would you see? What would be different to the way it is now? What if your workforce were 57% more likely to share their ideas or concerns? How much information about the concerns about safety and the ideas your workforce who are on the front line, who actually understand the interdependencies of the work they do? Just imagine how much more information you'd have if 57% were more likely to share their ideas and concerns. 58% less avoidant of safety issues, so more likely to engage in a conversation about safety issues rather than avoid them. No wonder you'd also see 63% more confident that changes would result in an improved process because they would be engaged in the change process. Now, that's what we can offer. That's what this research has offered the industry, is proof that if you are able to create leaders that perform well in those 4 intentional states measured by the ISA 360, you're likely, or you are able, to achieve these outcomes. What we've also found, though, is that based on our sample of leaders, a lot of leaders already appear stronger in commitment and caring actively. So they have a commitment to safety and they genuinely care about the people they work with, but they have significant gaps in curiosity and interconnectedness. Now, what we've also found is that these leaders weren't aware of these gaps. They were blind spots until their colleagues, manager, and staff gave them genuine, honest, and valid feedback using the ISA 360 tool. So if the gaps aren't even made aware to them, they're unable to transform those. So it's really important to understand that while we need to have all 4 working together, a typical leadership sample will only be higher performing in 2 of those. And they won't even understand or know or be aware of the gaps or their unskilledness in the last 2 factors. Now, what we've also found is that curiosity and interconnectedness, remember the 2 that the majority of leaders are poor at, are also shown to have a greater impact on employee engagement when you're comparing these top and bottom performers in these areas. And so not only are they missing, they're also the ones that our research sample has shown have a greater impact on engagement. They're the ones that when pulled, those levers are going to result in a more engaged workforce. Lastly, and this is the bit that really excites me, what we've found is that it is possible to transform into a more effective leader using these 4 intentional states as a focus. So in our longitudinal sample, some of our leaders we were able to actually retest after 2 years. And what we found is that leaders who engaged in the process achieved a statistically significant improvement in their ISA 360 results over 2 years. If you're interested in hearing more about that particular group of leaders in the organisation they work for, I'm presenting a case study with the general manager of that organisation tomorrow at 11 a.m. and definitely encourage you to tune into that one. So to sum up everything we've talked about today, and then to hand over to you all to see if there's any questions. Our longitudinal research has found that there are 4 proven intentional states that are required to be an effective leader and have a positive impact on both safety and performance. Now, to have that positive impact, what we've also found is that a leader needs to be effective in all 4 areas. It's not just enough to be high performing in one of those areas. Our research sample indicates that most leaders we've assessed are pretty good at 2 out of those 4 states. but they're unconsciously unskilled at the other two. And without participating in some form of empirical measurement, they're unaware of their unconscious skill level on those particular two. What we've also found is that being effective at all four will generate an improvement in performance, not just safety. And that leaders these days need to think of themselves as safety leaders as well as leaders. Safety isn't just up to the OSH reps or someone with a safety manager in their title. Every leader has an influence on safety. And to be effective, you need to be effective at all four intentional states. And lastly, to know where you're at in terms of your people, yourself and your organisation, it's really important to use empirical, research-based tools to help make the unconscious conscious so that you can get started in improving both safety and performance in your organisation. Thank you so much for having us and look forward to hearing what questions you might have.